December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor, Oahu, Hawaii. 7:48 a.m. The air smells of salt and oil. A gentle breeze ripples across the calm waters of the harbor where the U.S. Pacific Fleet sleeps at anchor, proud, glistening, and utterly unaware of what's coming. Above, in the blue morning sky, the drone of engines begins to swell. Faint at first, then deafening. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida peers through the canopy of his Nakajima B-5N torpedo bomber. The sun glints off the waves below as he raises his arm and shouts into his radio, voice trembling with adrenaline. Tora, Tora, Tora. The signal means total surprise. Moments later, the first torpedoes slice into the water, their wakes like silver snakes racing toward their prey. The battleships lined along Battleship Row, Arizona, West Virginia, Oklahoma, California, loom like sleeping giants. Within seconds, they're torn open by explosions that hurl geysers of steel and flames skyward. Inside the USS Arizona, Petty Officer Donald Stratton is thrown from his post as a 1,000-pound bomb pierces the forward magazine. A blinding flash. Then the ship splits apart. The shockwave ripples through the harbor, rattling windows miles away. The American sailors scramble in chaos, some barefoot, some half-dressed, grabbing rifles that will never fire in time. Machine guns clatter uselessly toward the sky. Above them, Zero fighters scream down, their cannons tearing through decks and fuel lines. For 2 hours, the attack is relentless. When it ends, the air is thick with smoke, and the waters of Pearl Harbor burn red with oil and blood. In Tokyo, that same night, a radio crackles with triumph. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto listens to the first reports from Hawaii. 4 battleships sunk, 4 more damaged. Over 2,000 Americans dead. Japan's combined fleet has dealt the most devastating naval blow in U.S. history. Yet Yamamoto's face is grim. Around him, his staff cheers. Maps of the Pacific marked with red pins. But he knows the Americans better than most of his men. He had studied at Harvard. He had walked the factories of Detroit and seen the assembly lines of Boeing and Ford. He leans back and murmurs quietly, almost to himself, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." His words hang in the air like a warning no one wants to hear. Back in Washington, D.C., chaos reigns in the Navy Department. Admiral Harold Stark, Chief of Naval Operations, slams his fist on the table. The telephone lines are flooded. Reports are incomplete. No one yet knows the full scope of the disaster. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, sitting in the Oval Office, listens in silence as his advisors read the first casualty lists. His jaw tightens. Within hours, Roosevelt's speechwriters are already at work. The next day, he'll stand before Congress and deliver the words that will change the course of the 20th century. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. But as the smoke clears over Oahu, the Japanese High Command celebrates what they believe to be a decisive victory. They have crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The mighty battleships that symbolized American sea power lie in twisted ruin. Japan's strategists calculate that it will take at least 2 to 3 years for the Americans to rebuild. And that, they believe, will be time enough. Time to seize the Philippines, the Dutch East Indies, the oil of Borneo, the rubber of Malaya, the ports of Rabaul and Truk. Time to establish an empire so vast that no counterattack could ever dislodge them. In Tokyo, the Imperial Navy's war planners look at the map and see destiny unfolding. They call it the Southern Operation. On the chart room walls of the Combined Fleet headquarters, Admiral Yamamoto's subordinates draw vast red circles of conquest across the Pacific. Each circle marks the reach of Japan's carriers, their air power extending like a rising sun over the ocean. They believe they have 6 months, maybe a year, before the Americans can even think about striking back. No one in that room imagines that in less than that time, New ships, new carriers, and new men will rise from the forges of American industry, faster than any navy in history has ever been built. No one yet understands that Pearl Harbor, rather than ending American sea power, has unleashed something Japan has never seen before. A nation capable of transforming its entire economy into a war machine. The Japanese think they've destroyed a fleet. What they've really done is light the fuse of an industrial revolution. December 10th, 1941, South China Sea. Rain lashes the decks of the battleship Nagato. The air smells of salt and fuel. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stands beneath the gray sky, his cap pulled low, watching as the imperial flag flaps violently in the wind. The war he'd warned against has begun, and for now, Japan is unstoppable. To the south, columns of smoke rise from Manila. The Philippines have fallen under Japanese assault. Across the Pacific, in Hong Kong, British garrisons surrender after days of brutal bombardment. The rising sun flies over the city's harbor forts. Every hour brings new reports. Victories stacking like dominoes. Malaya secured. Singapore collapsing. Wake Island under siege. Borneo taken. Guam overrun. The Imperial Japanese Navy rules the seas. 6 fleet carriers, 10 battleships, dozens of cruisers and destroyers. Their Zero fighters outfly anything the Allies can put in the sky. The radio men aboard the Nagato speak with quiet awe. The Americans, one mutters, won't recover from this for years. Yamamoto says nothing. He lights a cigarette, staring into the mist. The distant rumble of waves echoes through the steel hull beneath his feet. He knows victory has come too easily, and that easy victories breed dangerous illusions. Washington, D.C., December 1941. The United States reels from shock. The Pacific Fleet lies crippled, its heart torn out at Pearl Harbor. Admiral Chester W. Matthew Nimitz, a man known for calm even in chaos, receives a call from President Roosevelt himself. Within days, he is ordered to assume command of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. When Nimitz arrives in Pearl Harbor at the end of the month, the scene is apocalyptic. The harbor still reeks of oil and death. The sunken Arizona burns beneath a film of rainbow-colored slick. Divers work in silence, cutting through twisted metal to recover bodies. Nimitz doesn't speak as he tours the wreckage. His officers watch him closely, wondering what he'll say. Finally, he mutters under his breath, "The Japanese did us a favor." They stare at him, stunned. He explains, "They attacked us at the wrong time. They didn't hit the oil tanks, the dry docks, or the repair facilities. We can rebuild, right here." He's right. The American fleet isn't dead. It's only wounded. And behind it stands the greatest industrial machine the world has ever known. Detroit, Michigan, January 1942. At the Ford River Rouge plant, where thousands of workers once built Model A Fords, the assembly lines grind to a halt, then roar back to life, transformed. Where cars once rolled off the line, now come bombers. Ford's engineers redesigned their machinery overnight to produce B-24 Liberators, 4-engine heavy bombers capable of crossing oceans. At the Kaiser shipyards in Richmond, California, Henry J. Kaiser's crews, men and women working around the clock, start experimenting with something revolutionary: mass-produced ships. Instead of taking months, a new Liberty ship begins launching every few days. By year's end, they'll do it in a single week. The U.S. government calls it the arsenal of democracy. Roosevelt calls it the great arsenal of freedom. In Chicago, the South Side hums with the clang of steel. In Pittsburgh, furnaces roar day and night. The noise of war industry becomes the sound of the nation's heartbeat. Each city becomes a fortress of productivity, a front line of its own. In Tokyo, however, the imperial staff remains convinced of their advantage. Japan's war planners boast that it would take America at least 5 years to replace the losses of Pearl Harbor. Admiral Ozumi Nagano, chief of the Naval General Staff, outlines Japan's timetable. 6 months to conquer the Pacific, 1 year to consolidate the empire. Then, peace on Japanese terms. But Yamamoto isn't so sure. Reports begin to filter in. The Americans are not slowing down. In fact, they seem to be speeding up. Their factories are already churning out new destroyers and carriers, faster than Japan's dockyards can count. He sends a message to his superiors. If the war continues beyond 6 months, our prospects become uncertain. It's a warning no one wants to hear. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, the first of America's industrial miracles takes shape. The USS Essex, laid down at Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia in April 1941. Before the war even began, her construction accelerates after Pearl Harbor. Workers, many of them women and immigrants, labor through nights illuminated by floodlights. Sparks fly like stars across the shipyard as welders race against time. In less than a year, the Essex is ready for launch. Her sister ships, Yorktown, CV-10, Intrepid, CV-11, Hornet, CV-12, follow one after another. What took Japan years of craftsmanship and planning, the U.S. now accomplishes in months through relentless industrial rhythm. Every shipyard, every foundry, every assembly line now beats to one drum. And that drum is war. In the Imperial Navy's Intelligence Bureau, confusion grows. Analysts note increased radio chatter from U.S. coastal bases. Satellite docks are expanding. Cargo manifests show alarming quantities of steel, copper, and oil being diverted to shipyards. In a report marked Top Secret for Admiral Yamamoto's eyes only, an officer writes, "We estimate the Americans may be constructing not 3, but 12 new fleet carriers." Yamamoto stares at the paper for a long moment. He knows what that means. Japan's edge, the carrier advantage that made Pearl Harbor possible, is already slipping away. He folds the report and whispers to his aide, "Then we must destroy them before they sail." The countdown to the Battle of Midway has already begun. February 1942, Newport News, Shipbuilding, Virginia. Snow dusts the piers of the shipyard, but no one stops to admire it. Floodlights blaze through the night, and the clang of hammers echoes off the frozen river. Thousands of workers, men in greasy overalls, women in scarves and heavy coats, labor side by side. Sparks shower from welding torches as new hulls take shape. In the center of the yard, the unfinished USS Essex looms like a steel cathedral. At 872 feet long, she is the largest aircraft carrier yet built. But it's not her size that stuns visiting officers. It's her speed of construction. Every rivet, every bulkhead, every pipe is part of a new kind of war. A war of industry. A supervisor yells over the noise. "This ship was laid down last year, and she'll be ready to sail before the next one's over." The workers cheer. Many of them had brothers at Pearl Harbor, fathers fighting in the Philippines. Every weld, every plate of armor is personal. Detroit, Michigan, the Arsenal City. In the cavernous halls of the Willow Run plant, the assembly lines stretch for a mile. Conveyor belts move like arteries, carrying the beating heart of war. Ford engineers have done what no one thought possible. They've applied automobile mass production to aircraft manufacturing. Each shift of 24,000 workers assembles sections of the B-24 Liberator bomber with assembly line precision. Women known as Rosie the Riveters fasten aluminum panels, while machinists carve parts out of raw metal. A foreman boasts that a new bomber rolls off the line every 63 minutes. The smell of oil and metal fills the air. Over loudspeakers, patriotic music plays between shifts. War bonds are sold in the cafeteria. One mechanic, wiping grease from his hands, tells a reporter, "They hit us at Pearl, and they thought we'd cry. Instead, we built an army in a year. Washington, D.C. War Production Board Headquarters. Roosevelt's government has transformed overnight. The War Production Board, led by Donald Nelson, coordinates every ounce of steel, copper, and aluminum. Civilian factories are converted into war plants. Typewriter manufacturers build rifles. Refrigerator companies produce gun turrets. Roosevelt's victory plan demands numbers that seem impossible. 50,000 aircraft in 1 year, 100,000 vehicles per month, a fleet to dominate 2 oceans. The president knows it's more than industry, it's psychology. America must believe it can outbuild its enemies, and the nation does. In a radio address, Roosevelt declares, "Powerful enemies must be outfought and outproduced. We will not only defend freedom, we will manufacture it." Tokyo, Naval General Staff Headquarters, April 1942. Admiral Osami Nagano stands before a wall-sized map of the Pacific. His officers have just received word of something extraordinary, an American air raid on Tokyo itself. 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers, led by Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle, have launched from the carrier USS Hornet. No one believed it possible. Twin-engine bombers taking off from a ship, yet it happened. Tokyo burned for the first time. The Doolittle raid causes little physical damage, but enormous psychological shock. Japan's press censors the story, but whispers spread through the fleet. If America can strike Tokyo, what else can it do? Yamamoto's response is immediate. He insists on drawing out the American carriers to destroy them once and for all. He chooses a place halfway between Midway Atoll and Hawaii, a trap designed to finish what Pearl Harbor began. The plan is audacious, but it hides a fatal flaw. The Americans are no longer reeling. They're rebuilding and listening. Pearl Harbor, U.S. Naval Intelligence Station, Chaipio, May 1942. In a basement cluttered with typewriters and coffee cups, a team of codebreakers led by Commander Joseph Rochefort works tirelessly. The Japanese Navy's communications are encrypted by a complex system known as JN-25. But bit by bit, the Americans have begun to crack it. By late May, they intercept a message referring to an operation against a location codenamed AF. Rochefort bets his reputation on it. AF means Midway. When Nimitz receives the decrypted message, he smiles grimly. The Japanese are coming, and this time the Americans will be waiting. June 4th, 1942. The Battle of Midway. Dawn breaks over the Pacific. The sea is calm. The Japanese fleet, 4 of the same carriers that struck Pearl Harbor, sails in confident formation: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. But in the sky above, American pilots from the carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown are already diving. At 10:22 a.m., bombs rain down from Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bombers. Within minutes, 3 Japanese carriers erupt into towers of fire. The Hiryu counterattacks, crippling the Yorktown, but by sunset she too is gone. Yamamoto's dream of a decisive victory evaporates beneath the smoke. Japan's carrier force, the pride of its navy, is annihilated in a single day. And across the Pacific, American factories have already begun replacing every ship, every plane, every loss. Japan has just learned the first great truth of modern war. You cannot outfight a nation that can outbuild you. As reports of the Midway disaster reach Tokyo, Yamamoto closes his eyes. The ocean, once his weapon, has turned against him. In his private journal, he writes, "The enemy's industrial power is like the tide, slow to rise, but unstoppable once it begins. The tide has indeed begun to rise. And soon, it will drown the empire of Japan beneath waves of steel, smoke, and American determination." August 1942. Norfolk Naval Shipyard, Virginia. The air smells of hot metal and paint. The clang of hammers echoes off the dry dock walls as the USS South Dakota, BB-57, comes to life. Her gray hull gleams beneath the sun, still streaked with primer and salt. Crews swarm her decks like ants, electricians threading cables, welders sealing seams, gunners mounting her 16-inch Mark VI cannons. A foreman shouts over the din, "We're launching ahead of schedule." He grins, teeth white against soot-streaked skin. The South Dakota is proof of something extraordinary. America is now building battleships faster than Japan can sink them. Less than a year after Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Navy's newest dreadnought stands ready for sea trials. Her radar systems, once experimental, now give her eyes that can pierce the night. Her engines can drive her across the Pacific at 27 knots. Every bolt, every shell, is a message to Tokyo. You thought you broke us. You only made us faster. Seattle, Washington, Puget Sound, Naval Yard. Nearby, another behemoth takes shape, the USS Washington, sister ship to the South Dakota. Welders work by floodlight, 24 hours a day. Sparks fall into puddles like fireflies. America's shipyards have become a new kind of battlefield, and the workers, its soldiers. Posters line the walls. Keep 'em firing. Every rivet a bullet. We can do it. Each week, new hulls slide into the water. Destroyers, submarines, landing craft. And at the heart of it all, the aircraft carriers. The new generation, Essex class. The Essex herself is launched in July 1942. Her flight deck, 862 feet of steel, will soon host the planes that will turn the tide of war. The Grumman F-6F Hellcat, the Douglas SBD Dauntless, the TBF Avenger. Her arrival marks the beginning of something Japan cannot comprehend: industrial velocity. Tokyo, Imperial Navy Headquarters, late 1942. Inside a dimly lit operations room, Japanese officers study a map cluttered with red flags. Midway, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. Each one represents a battle lost or still raging. Intelligence reports pour in. New U.S. carriers sighted. Possibly 2 or 3. No, 6. The data doesn't make sense. Japan's own shipyards, limited by resources and skilled labor, are producing vessels at a fraction of that rate. Admiral Yamamoto demands confirmation. "Impossible," he snaps. "No nation can build so fast." But the facts are undeniable. The Americans have not only replaced their losses from Pearl Harbor, they've surpassed them. Within 12 months of the attack, the U.S. Navy has commissioned 8 new carriers, 10 new battleships, and hundreds of smaller vessels. It's a fleet born not just from steel, but from a national will that Japan's leaders never accounted for. San Francisco Bay, Kaiser Shipyards, December 1942. A crowd gathers along the waterfront as a Liberty ship, the Robert E. Peary, slides into the water. Confetti falls, bands play. But what makes this launch historic isn't the ship itself. It's the time it took to build it. 4 days, 15 hours, and 26 minutes. Built from prefabricated sections and welded together with ruthless efficiency, she's a symbol of what America has become. A nation that measures progress in hours, not years. Henry Kaiser, the industrialist behind the miracle, watches proudly. "We've built a new kind of weapon," he tells reporters. "Speed." His shipyards will produce 747 ships in 4 years, more than the entire Japanese merchant fleet. The Pacific Front, Guadalcanal, 1942 to 1943. While factories roar at home, in the humid jungles of the Solomon Islands, U.S. Marines fight tooth and nail against entrenched Japanese forces. Supplies are scarce. The Navy bleeds ships at Savo Island, the Coral Sea, and Santa Cruz. But every time a cruiser goes down, 2 more are being built. Every time a pilot is lost, another squadron graduates from flight school in Florida or Texas. By early 1943, the Japanese Navy realizes something dreadful. Every time they sink an American ship, it reappears, newer and deadlier. Rear Admiral Ugaki Matome writes in his diary, "The Americans fight with steel, not just men. For every ship we destroy, 3 more rise from the sea." And back home, American families feel that same fire. War bonds, ration stamps, recycling drives. Even children collect scrap metal for the cause. The country isn't merely supporting the war, it has become the war. Washington, D.C. Naval Office of Procurement, February 1943. Stacks of paper cover every desk. Requisitions for steel, blueprints for destroyers, orders for engines. Admiral Ernest King, the combative chief of naval operations, reviews a new report from the War Production Board. Projected naval expansion for 1943 and 1944, 15 fleet carriers, 50 escort carriers, 150 destroyers, 200 submarines. King grins. "Gentlemen," he says, "let's make sure Japan sees every one of them." In the months following, Japanese reconnaissance pilots over the Pacific send back photos of something that terrifies their commanders. Vast convoys of ships stretching to the horizon, all flying the American flag. Destroyers, carriers, oilers, repair ships. An armada so immense that it defies calculation. Japan's admirals begin to realize that Pearl Harbor was not the end of the American fleet. It was the beginning of its transformation. The empire had bet on speed, on precision strikes, on a short war. But what they now face is a nation whose greatest weapon isn't any one ship or plane. It's the factory floor itself, and that weapon has only just begun to fire. April 1943. The Brooklyn Navy Yard, New York. A low fog rolls off the East River as dawn breaks over the skyline. Beneath it, a forest of cranes swings slowly to life. Welding torches flare. The sound of steel grinding against steel fills the air. Thousands of men and women march through the yard gates, lunch pails in hand, ready for another 12-hour shift. The Brooklyn Yard has become one of the beating hearts of Roosevelt's industrial war engine. It's here that ships like the USS Iowa and USS Missouri begin as sketches and rise into titans of war. Each morning whistle sends a surge of humanity into motion. Electricians, riveters, pipe fitters, draftsmen, foremen, a miniature army in denim and overalls. Posters hang from the yard walls. Loose lips sink ships, and your work can shorten the war. A superintendent walks along the scaffolding beside the unfinished USS Iowa's hull. He pauses, wiping sweat and soot from his brow, and says to a young welder, "Son, when this ship sails, she'll be the most powerful thing on the ocean. Don't forget, every spark you throw tonight, some sailor's life depends on it." Chicago, Republic Steel Plant. Molten iron pours from the blast furnaces, cascading like a river of fire. The temperature inside the mill exceeds 120 degrees, but no one slows down. The country's appetite for metal is insatiable. Tank armor, ship hulls, carrier decks, and aircraft frames. At the loading dock, trains wait to carry freshly forged plates east, to Newport News, to Mare Island, to San Francisco. Each shipment is tagged with its destination: USS Essex, USS Bunker Hill, USS Lexington, CV-16. A foreman watches one shipment being loaded and mutters, "We're turning mountains into ships faster than the Japanese can sink them." He's right. June 1943, the Pacific Theater. At sea, the transformation is already visible. American convoys now stretch across the ocean, a procession of steel giants protected by destroyer screens and circling aircraft. The once crippled Pacific Fleet now boasts a power no Navy has ever wielded before. On the bridge of the USS Essex, Captain Donald B. Duncan looks out at the horizon. His flight deck hums with activity. Deck crews racing to launch F-6F Hellcats and TBF Avengers for another strike against Japanese positions in the Gilberts. Below deck, the air smells of fuel and machine oil. The carrier's radar pings steadily, scanning miles of sky. Every few seconds, the crackle of the intercom fills the command room. Launch 1 ready. Launch 2 clear. Engines roar to life, wings unfold, and the planes shoot down the deck into the blinding Pacific sun. These are not the fragile wooden decks of Japan's carriers. The Essex is built from lessons learned the hard way. Reinforced decks, armored elevators, faster elevators, greater capacity. Each new carrier embodies America's doctrine of adaptation. Build, learn, rebuild, improve. Tokyo. Naval General Staff, mid-1943. Admiral Minechi Koga, now Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet after Yamamoto's death, stands before a wall of intelligence summaries. He reads one, his face tightening. American fleet strength. Carriers, 20 operational, 8 in reserve or under repair. Battleships, 15 active. Escort carriers, 45 in production. His aide, Captain Ugaki, whispers, "That cannot be accurate. They would need infinite shipyards." Koga sighs. It seems they've found them. He knows now what Yamamoto had feared. Japan is no longer fighting an enemy across an ocean. They are fighting a factory. The Empire of Japan, once confident that its disciplined craftsmanship and naval tradition would triumph, now finds itself outmatched by raw productivity. Every Mitsubishi Zero lost in combat takes months to replace. Every Hellcat shot down is replaced in weeks. Portland, Oregon. Swan Island, shipyard, summer 1943. Women in overalls stand on scaffolds, welding plates to the hull of a new escort carrier. They wipe grime from their faces and laugh, calling themselves Victory Girls. The air hums with acetylene torches. One woman, Mary Doyle, age 22, works through the night shift riveting hull plates. Her husband was a sailor aboard the USS Arizona. He never came home. When a reporter asks her why she works 16-hour days, she doesn't look up from her rivet gun, because they thought we'd quit. Across America, millions share her sentiment. Housewives, mechanics, machinists, all part of a single, synchronized war engine. Washington, D.C. Roosevelt's fireside address, July 1943. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's calm voice drifts through living rooms across the nation. Families sit close to their radios, the glow of the dial flickering across their faces. We have proved that democracy, when armed with conviction, can outproduce any tyranny. Our factories are the front lines. Our workers are the soldiers behind every ship at sea. In the shipyards, loudspeakers replay his words between shifts. In the foundries, workers pause for just a moment, heads bowed, before returning to the thunder of steel and flame. By year's end, America will have launched 200 major combat ships. Japan, by comparison, fewer than 100. The Pacific, December 1943. The USS South Dakota, USS Iowa, and USS Essex steam together through a sea that once belonged entirely to Japan. Overhead, the sky is filled with American aircraft, hundreds of them, circling in tight formation. On the bridge of the Iowa, sailors listen to Tokyo Rose on the radio. Her voice, soft and mocking, tells them Japan will soon crush their fleet. The men laugh. One sailor says, "Tell her to look out the window." From that window, across the endless Pacific horizon, the sea is filled with gray steel, ship after ship, wave after wave. The sleeping giant isn't sleeping anymore. It's awake, and it's coming. January 1944. Truck Lagoon, Caroline Islands. Rain lashes across the deck of the Yamato, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The ship is colossal, 72,000 tons of steel, her 18.1-inch guns the largest ever mounted on a warship. But her crew feels none of the old confidence. Around her, the once mighty combined fleet lies at anchor. Dozens of cruisers, destroyers, and carriers crowded into the lagoon like trapped prey. From the bridge, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, once the architect of Pearl Harbor, looks out across the misty harbor. His hands tremble slightly as he grips the railing. "We were lions once," he mutters. "Now we hide in a cage of coral." Intelligence reports speak of a vast American armada moving west. Carriers, battleships, troop transports, destroyers, all steaming toward the Marshalls. Nagumo knows what that means. The storm has arrived. He glances toward the horizon. For months, Japan's commanders have prayed the Americans would tire, that their industry would slow, that their spirit would fade. Instead, the Americans have accelerated. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, February 1944. The harbor is alive again. The skeletons of the Arizona and Oklahoma still rest beneath the waves, but now new ships crowd the docks. Sleek destroyers, cruisers, and carriers bristling with anti-aircraft guns. The repair yards never stopped since that Sunday morning 2 years ago. Admiral Chester Nimitz stands on a pier, hands clasped behind his back, watching as the USS Bunker Hill, CV-17, departs for the Central Pacific. The decks of Pearl are crowded with activity. Cranes swinging cargo, sailors shouting, engines rumbling. Behind him, a journalist asks, "Admiral, is it true you're sending more carriers than Japan even has left?" Nimitz smiles faintly. "We don't count ships anymore. We count tons of steel." U.S. Homefront, Spring 1944. Across the country, war production has reached its crescendo. The numbers are staggering. 96,000 aircraft built in a single year. 8 new Essex-class carriers launched in 6 months. Dozens of battleships and cruisers completed. Thousands of tanks and trucks rolling from Detroit every week. Factories no longer sleep. Shifts change, but the machines never stop. The night sky above Chicago and Pittsburgh glows orange from the steel mills. A second dawn, made of fire. At Kaiser's Yard, a foreman yells to his men, "We're launching the Bayfield at dawn and the Monrovia before lunch." The men laugh, exhausted but proud. In a single day, America now produces more tonnage than Japan can in a month. And deep within this industrial heartbeat, there's something even more powerful than metal. Resolve. Tokyo, Naval Ministry, March 1944. A silence hangs over the room. Admiral Minechi Koga reads the latest intelligence report aloud. American carrier groups now operating independently in multiple theaters. Total estimated carriers, 45. Escort carriers, over 100. One officer slams his fist on the table. "It's impossible! They cannot have built so many!" But the evidence is clear. Japan's network of spies and scouts confirms it. American shipyards on both coasts are launching vessels at an incomprehensible pace. Even the small jeep carriers, simple escort carriers built on merchant hulls, appear by the dozen each month. Koga exhales slowly. "Gentlemen, the Americans have created an ocean from steel." Around him, his subordinates fall silent. They've begun to understand that Japan's victory at Pearl Harbor was not the beginning of dominance. It was the beginning of their own countdown. February 1944. Operation Hailstone, Truck Lagoon. The morning sky turns black with planes. Hundreds of American aircraft sweep in from the east. Avengers, Dauntlesses, and Hellcats screaming down from the clouds. "Enemy planes! Hundreds!" cries a Japanese lookout. Alarms wail across the lagoon. Sailors scramble to man anti-aircraft guns as the first wave dives. Explosions rip through the anchorage. Battleships and cruisers erupt in flame. Oil slicks ignite across the lagoon. The sky is filled with smoke, shrapnel, and falling aircraft. In less than 2 days, the heart of the Japanese Navy's forward base is obliterated. Over 40 ships are sunk or destroyed. Hundreds of aircraft are lost. Admiral Koga, watching from the command bunker, whispers, "So this is what industrial war looks like." He knows it's over. Japan can no longer replace its losses. Not ships, not planes, not men. Every pilot lost is irreplaceable. Every shipyard bombed a fatal wound. Meanwhile, America's losses are trivial, absorbed instantly by a limitless machine. U.S. Navy operations, the Central Pacific Drive. By mid-1944, the Pacific Fleet has transformed into something the world has never seen before. Task Force 58, commanded by Admiral Mark Mitcher. It's a floating city, 15 carriers, 8 battleships, hundreds of escorts, all moving as one. Sailors call it Murderer's Row. The task force represents the pinnacle of American industrial might. Ships fueled by Kansas oil, armored with Pennsylvania steel, guided by radar built in New Jersey, crewed by boys from Ohio, California, and Texas. From this armada, waves of aircraft strike Japanese bases day after day. Eniwetok, Saipan, Guam, the Marianas. Each attack feels like an industrial hammer blow. The Japanese Air Force fights bravely, but their pilots are green, their planes outdated. They are swept from the skies in hours. By the summer of 1944, Japan has lost the air. And when you lose the air in the Pacific, you lose the war. June 1920, 1944. The Battle of the Philippine Sea. Over 450 Japanese aircraft rise to meet the American fleet, the largest carrier battle in history. From the deck of the USS Lexington, CV-16, sailors watch as black dots appear on the horizon. "Here they come," someone mutters. The air soon fills with tracers, flak bursts, and the roar of engines. But the Japanese planes never reach their targets. Hellcats from the Essex and Enterprise swarm them. The American pilots call it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. By sunset, over 300 Japanese planes have been shot down. The losses are catastrophic. The surviving Japanese pilots radio home. The enemy's planes are endless, like locusts from the sea. In Tokyo, the shock is complete. Japan's air arm is shattered, its carriers useless without planes or pilots. The Imperial Command finally grasps the full horror of what they face. An enemy that rebuilds faster than destruction can catch up. The Japanese strategy had relied on time, but America had erased time itself. As the fires burn across the Pacific, a single truth crystallizes. Japan had launched a war it could never sustain against a nation whose factories were as deadly as its guns. The sleeping giant had not only awakened, it had become a storm. October 1944, Ulithi Atoll, Western Pacific. The lagoon is so crowded with ships that it looks like you could walk from one deck to another without touching the water. Battleships, carriers, cruisers, destroyers, oilers, tenders, hundreds of them. The USS Iowa looms beside the USS Essex, while nearby, tankers refuel destroyers in synchronized precision. From above, it appears unreal. A man-made archipelago of steel, each vessel humming, each crew preparing for the next push. Ulithi is no longer a remote coral atoll. It's the largest naval base in the world, and it didn't exist a year ago. Admiral William Bull Halsey, pacing aboard the USS New Jersey, studies the horizon through binoculars. He grins and mutters, "My God, look at that." The Japanese don't stand a chance. He's right. The American fleet now stretches across the ocean like a moving continent. The Japanese, by comparison, can barely muster a handful of carriers, hollow shells with no trained aviators to fly from them. Tokyo, October 1944. In a dimly lit command chamber, Admiral Toyoda Suemu receives the latest intelligence from the Philippines. The Americans are landing at Leyte Gulf, the long-feared invasion of the homeland's defensive perimeter. Reports arrive one after another. Enemy fleet sighted, 34 carriers, 12 battleships, hundreds of escorts. Their landing craft number in the hundreds. Our airfields cannot stop them. Toyota slams his fist on the table. 34 carriers? Impossible. A young intelligence officer answers quietly, "Sir, that is confirmed. They have more carriers than we have aircraft." The words hang in the air, heavy and unanswerable. Leyte Gulf, Philippines, October 23 to 26, 1944. The largest naval battle in history begins. The sea boils with action. Battleships trade salvos, aircraft scream overhead, and torpedoes streak through the waves like underwater lightning. For Japan, this is their decisive battle, the one their strategy had always envisioned. But the outcome is already written. Admiral Kurita's center force sails into the maw of an American trap. The U.S. Navy's radar-controlled gunnery cuts through Japanese ships before they can close the distance. The Yamato fires her massive guns, the largest naval cannons ever built. But she's too slow, too blind, too isolated. American carrier planes descend in swarms. Hellcats, Helldivers, and Avengers, each an industrial miracle of aluminum and horsepower, hammer the Japanese fleet. The Musashi, Yamato's sister ship, takes over 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs before she finally capsizes and sinks beneath the waves. By the end of the battle, 4 Japanese carriers, 3 battleships, 10 cruisers, and 11 destroyers are gone. The Imperial Navy, once the most powerful in the Pacific, is finished. The survivors limp back to Japan, their fuel almost gone, their morale broken. San Diego, California, November 1944. While the battle rages across the world, back home the shipyards are already turning out replacements for every vessel lost. The process has become a kind of industrial choreography. Blueprints arrive on Monday, keel laid on Wednesday, superstructure assembled by Friday, launched by the next month. It's mechanical, relentless, unstoppable. A reporter touring the Bethlehem Steel shipyard asks a foreman, "How can you keep this pace?" The man shrugs, shouting over the din of machinery. "We just don't stop. Japan's got no oil, no steel, no men. We've got everything. That's how we win." Okinawa, April 1945. The sea burns. Kamikaze planes dive out of the clouds, smashing into U.S. ships in suicidal fury. The USS Bunker Hill is hit twice in one morning. Explosions tear through her decks, killing nearly 400 men. For a moment, the Pacific seems to bleed fire. Yet even this new horror cannot halt the advance. Within weeks, repair ships arrive. Burned decks are rebuilt. New planes are flown in. By the time the Bunker Hill limps back to port, 3 more carriers have already joined the fleet. Japan's desperate gamble to trade lives for ships fails against the one enemy they cannot destroy: American replacement capacity. Every kamikaze strike that sinks a destroyer is nullified before its wreck cools. In California, another is already sliding down the slipway. Tokyo, May 1945. A cold rain falls over the Imperial Palace. Admiral Yonai and what remains of the Naval High Command meet in silence. On the table lies a report marked Confidential Strategic Assessment. It reads, "American fleet strength exceeds 1,200 major warships. Carrier-based aircraft, 10,000 operational. Japan's industrial output, 8% of pre-war capacity." Yonai whispers, "We have nothing left." No one replies. The empire that once stretched across Asia now faces ruin. Its cities are burning, its ships rusting in harbor, its people starving. The war that began with Japan's illusion of dominance at Pearl Harbor has come full circle. The very fleet they thought destroyed now looms offshore, multiplied tenfold. July 1945. The U.S. Navy's Pacific Command, Guam. Admiral Nimitz surveys a chart of the Japanese home islands. His fleet encircles Japan completely, an iron ring of carriers, submarines, and battleships. Behind them, waves of B-29 bombers strike from the Marianas. When Nimitz receives the message that the atomic bomb has been successfully tested, he nods but says nothing. He already knows the end is near. The fleet alone could have starved Japan into submission. The bomb would only hasten what industry had already made inevitable. August 1945. Tokyo Bay. The war is over. The USS Missouri lies anchored in still waters. Aboard her deck, Japanese officials in formal dress stand before representatives of the Allied powers. General Douglas MacArthur speaks solemnly. "It is my earnest hope that from this solemn occasion a better world shall emerge." As the ink dries on Japan's instrument of surrender, sailors along the Missouri's rails stare at the skyline of Tokyo. Many remember Pearl Harbor. Many lost friends there. Now, the Pacific is silent. Beyond the bay, hundreds of American ships lie at anchor, an entire navy that didn't exist 4 years earlier. Each one forged in factories, built by millions who never saw the sea. And somewhere, deep in memory, Admiral Yamamoto's warning echoes. "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." He had been right all along. The empire of the rising sun had struck first. But it was America's factories, its workers, its boundless capacity to build, that struck last. The Japanese commanders couldn't believe it then. But history would never let them forget it.